There's something about the dead of night, the kind of silence that feels alive, the kind of stillness that hums with unspoken secrets. It's the hour when even time itself seems to hold its breath. When shadows shift, not because of wind, but because they're watching you. It's when the world is asleep, and only fear stays awake. But within that darkness, within that dreadful emptiness, lies something strangely beautiful. The truth about our courage, our grief, our resilience, and how, even in the blackest moments, a faint glimmer of hope can guide us through. Tonight, we step into 3 disturbing true stories that happened when the night was deepest, when everything safe felt far away, and when only the sound of a heartbeat stood between life and something else. The first story comes from a man named Jacob, a quiet soul from Montana, whose life changed on the loneliest road in America. It was past 2 in the morning when his car coughed its last breath on Highway 87, surrounded by nothing but fields of frost and shadows stretching for miles. He had been driving home after burying his mother, his heart hollow, his hands trembling on the steering wheel as though grief itself were steering him. When the car finally stopped, so did his strength. No motorcell signal, no passing headlights, only the wind whispering across the plains. He decided to walk 30 miles to the nearest town. 30 miles of silence, grief, and cold. The night wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. Each step sounded too loud. His breath came out in small clouds of white that disappeared almost instantly, swallowed by the void. But after the 5th mile, he heard it. At first, it was faint like his own echo. Then it came again, clearer, closer. 3 hollow knocks. Knock, knock. He stopped walking. The sound stopped too. His pulse thundered. He whispered into the dark, "Hello." No answer. Just the wind brushing through the dead grass. He took another step. Knock, knock, knock. Louder now. It wasn't footsteps. It was something else, something imitating him. He turned around, his flashlight trembling. Nothing. Just the empty road, stretching back into eternity. Fear began to crawl under his skin, cold and invasive. He walked faster, heart racing, but the knocks followed slower, deliberate, echoing like a heartbeat behind him. Knock, knock, knock. Then came something worse, the faint outline of a figure ahead. A woman standing in the middle of the road, her back turned, her dress pale against the dark. Relief hit him for a moment. Another traveler, maybe? "Hey," he called out, desperate, his voice breaking the stillness. The woman didn't move. "Please, I need help." When she finally turned, his flashlight trembled violently in his hand. Her face was a blur of shadow, but where her eyes should have been, there was only emptiness. 2 hollow sockets staring into him, cold as the wind itself. The flashlight flickered and went out. Jacob ran. He didn't stop running until the first color of dawn touched the horizon. When he stumbled into a gas station, pale and shaking, the old clerk behind the counter froze and said quietly, "Your lucky son." Most who see her on mile 13 don't make it out. That night haunted him for years. But over time, Jacob began to understand something deeper. That ghostly woman, the one he saw with hollow eyes, was not there to kill him. She was there to remind him of what he refused to face, the grief he had buried deep inside. The knocks were echoes of his own denial, his own sorrow demanding to be acknowledged. The darkness on that road was not just outside it, was inside him. Fear is not just about monsters. It's about mirrors. The things that terrify us most are often the reflections of what we try to hide. When we're alone, especially in the dead of night, silence becomes an amplifier for the truths we've tried to silence. The ghosts that follow us might not wear white dresses, they might wear the shape of regret, shame, or heartbreak. Fear, in its cruel way, is often the universe whispering, "Face what you've buried." Jacob's story is not just about surviving something supernatural. It is about walking through the night of your own soul and realizing that dawn only comes when you stop running. He learned that the only way to quiet the knocks was to face the darkness head-on, to weep, to grieve, to heal. because fear thrives in avoidance, but courage lives in the act of turning around. The second story comes from a century ago, but its echo feels timeless. It is the story of a lighthouse keeper on the Welsh coast who vanished one stormy night in 1912. His journal entries still sit in the Maritime Museum, and the last few lines are scratched in trembling ink. The sea calls my name again tonight. The wind whispers the numbers of the lost. The man had worked alone for months, tending the light that guided ships safely home. Locals said he began hearing voices through the waves' whispers that sounded like the names of those who drowned offshore. Each night, he lit the lamp anyway, his eyes hollow but his duty unbroken. And then one morning, he was gone. No body, no sign of struggle, only the light still burning, steady against the wind. Some believe he walked into the sea. Others think he was taken by the ghosts of the drowned. But his story lives because of what it represents, the courage to stand alone in the storm. He didn't just fight ghosts, he fought loneliness, fear, and madness. Yet he still lit the lamp. Even when the world outside howled, even when the darkness tried to claim him, he chose to be a light for others. That's what real bravery looks like, not the absence of fear, but the persistence of purpose in its presence. Sometimes we are the lighthouse in our own storm, shining for others even as the waves crash around us. The third story is one that travels through whispers in old towns and quiet corners of history. They call it the whisper in the attic. A young couple bought a century-old home, unaware of its history. The wife began hearing faint whispers late at night, just above their bedroom. At first, it was soft, barely audible, but over time, it became a single phrase, repeated with painful desperation. "Tell him I'm sorry." Her husband couldn't hear it, thought she was imagining things. But every night, the same words returned, trembling through the floorboards, pleading for forgiveness. One day, she decided to climb into the attic. Dust coated the air like fog, and spider webs hung like ghostly curtains. She found a wooden chest tucked beneath a broken beam. Inside was an old journal, yellowed and cracked, written by a woman who once lived there nearly a century earlier. The pages told a story of betrayal, a husband who died suddenly after discovering her secret affair. Her final entry read, "I see him in the shadows every night. I beg for his forgiveness, but he never speaks." The wife realized the whispers weren't for her, they were from the past, echoing through time. The ghost didn't want vengeance. She wanted peace. That night, the woman whispered into the dark, "He forgives you." The house fell silent. No more whispers, no more cries. The haunting ended, not because of fear, but because of compassion. Sometimes, horror is just sorrow waiting to be understood. The dead whisper because the living refuse to listen. There's a kind of pain that lingers when words are left unsaid, when apologies die on our tongues. The whisper in the attic reminds us that silence can become its own haunting. It's a warning and a plea. Say what you need to say while you still can. Because ghosts aren't always born from tragedy. Sometimes they're born from regret. The next tale is one of darkness beneath the earth. The tunnel beneath, a true story whispered among miners. A group of men became trapped deep underground after a collapse. For 3 days, they lived in pitch blackness, breathing dust, hearing the groans of the earth shifting above them. Some began to lose hope. But on the second night, they reported seeing a faint glow in the tunnel, a shape of light, almost human, walking ahead of them, guiding them through the debris. They followed it. Hours later, rescuers found them exactly where they said they had seen the light. But one man was missing, the one who had died minutes before the others were saved. Sometimes, hope doesn't come from above. It comes from beyond. The dead of night can be merciful too. When all seems lost, even the departed may lend their light. Hope, it seems, never really dies, it just changes form. And then there's the traveler, the one who trusted his intuition. He stopped at a small roadside motel on his way through Nevada, checked into a room, and as soon as he walked in, a wave of unease hit him. The air felt heavy. The smell of iron and something sweet lingered in the walls. He couldn't explain it, but something inside screamed, "Leave." He went back to the clerk and asked to switch rooms. The clerk frowned, confused but compliant. That night, the police arrived. The room he was first assigned to was sealed off. A body had been discovered beneath the bed. Sometimes, the voice that saves us doesn't shout, whispers. Intuition isn't fear, it's wisdom in disguise. An ancient knowing that something isn't right. Trust it. There's a family portrait that once hung in an old farmhouse in Ohio, depicting the family of 4 who lived there. Over time, they noticed the portrait changing. Shadows deepened. A 5th figure appeared faintly behind them. They ignored it, laughed it off, until one morning, their youngest was gone and the 5th figure in the painting was no longer faint. Evil doesn't always burst through the door. Sometimes, it waits patiently, feeding on our denial. Ignoring darkness doesn't make it disappear. It grows in silence. Only when we confront it do we take back our power. In another story, a hospital night watchman spent his shifts praying over the deceased before they were moved to the morgue. One night, he noticed a shadow following him home, lingering at his doorway. He could feel it behind him every night as he whispered prayers for strangers. But instead of fear, he responded with faith. He prayed louder, not for protection, but for peace for the souls that followed him. Eventually, the haunting stopped. The shadow never returned. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness, the gentlest prayer, can silence even the darkest presence. The light you offer others will always return to you. And finally, the widow who received one last call. It came 3 nights after her husband's funeral. The phone rang at 3:12 a.m. His old ringtone. She answered, heart racing. Static filled the line, and then his voice, calm, warm, familiar. "It's okay. Let go." The call ended, and the line went dead. Phone records showed no incoming calls. Love, it seems, transcends even death. It lingers in the air, in the memory, in the heartbeat that refuses to fade. The dead of night often feels endless. It presses down on you, heavy, suffocating, whispering that you are alone. But every haunting, every chill, every scream that echoes through the dark carries meaning. Because fear, at its core, reminds us that we're still alive, that our hearts still beat, that our spirits still fight. The night doesn't come to destroy us. It comes to test how brightly we can burn. And when dawn comes, and it always does, you realize that you were never truly alone. So when fear knocks, don't run. Listen. Maybe it's not there to harm you. Maybe it's trying to teach you. Let your light flicker, if it must, but never let it go out. May every frightened heart find courage, every broken soul find healing, and every wandering light find its way home. May the dead of night remind you not of what to fear, but of the strength that rises when everything else falls silent. Because even in the darkest hours, the human spirit still glows. And that glow, that's what the darkness fears most.